My name is Reed Swetlin, and I'm the Associate Dean of Campus Engagement here at Gordon College. And I'm also a mental health counselor in our Center for Student Counseling and Wellness. Um, my role in student engagement is to partner with students and different student groups around programming that involves mental health issues, psychoeducation efforts, and then my primary role is actually still to provide direct student care in the counseling center. I think some of the effects of the pandemic are really varied. It, Much of the anxiety that came at the very beginning of the pandemic, I think, had a lot to do with the fact that it was ever changing and changing so quickly, and so many companies and schools and families and communities were all having to adapt very quickly to figure out how they could continue providing either services or doing business, or how to just continue to stay in operation. And I think the nature of how fast things were changing accelerated a lot of anxiety that actually was probably already there, and people were probably struggling to manage in general prior to the anxiety. To the pandemic. So the pandemic just kind of highlighted, elevated, escalated all of the existing anxiety that was there. In general, what I would describe in terms of mental health is uh, that's composed of our emotions and our thoughts and how they influence just our daily functioning. If you were to think of it as everybody has physical health, but a person may not have a physical disability or physical illness, everybody also has mental health, even if you don't necessarily have a mental illness. Um, our mental health is with us all the time. It's the interaction of our observations in life and of the world. It's the blending of our intellectual reasoning and our emotional functioning is what affects our mental health. Anxiety is the most common presenting issue that students will seek some counseling support for. And that's really understandable because there are so many levels of transition that students are going through that manifests as anxiety. In general, if you think about transition as the number one stressor of all, and students are going through numerous concurrent transitions. They've left home, they're making new friends, they're thinking about their futures. Their whole sense of self is really kind of in transition. So it makes a lot of sense that anxiety would be the first thing that students are feeling. Students are, working and struggling to manage their mental health, and they live in an environment that actually isn't very conducive to mental health. A typical student's day is going to be 15, 16 hours long, and during that day they may have who knows how many classes, 2, 3, 4 classes, labs, sports practice, rehearsals, meetings of all kinds, clubs. So their attention is split in a lot of different directions, and that's just an awful lot to manage. Things we don't really know yet about continuing sort of fallout from the pandemic is that it really affected people very differently, depending on how old they were, where they were in their schooling, how it affected their families directly. Some people were really, really just inconvenienced by the pandemic, whereas other families really suffered, tremendously, either through an economic loss, job loss, or of course, losing a loved one is terrible. But we really don't know, and we won't know the full effects of the pandemic, I think, for another decade. Uh, Students should expect to be experiencing a certain amount of anxiety, and that certainly just comes with being a student, living in the environment that you do, and being under the pressures that you are. So a certain amount of anxiety is to be expected, and we wouldn't necessarily want to say that that's a bad thing or wrong. It just kind of is, it comes with the nature of being a student. What you'd really want to gauge, and this is sort of a self-monitoring practice, is what's the degree of impairment? Is my anxiety keeping me from doing the things I want to be doing? Going out with friends, going to class, managing my time, being able to complete assignments, or is it reaching kind of a different level where it is impairing those things and I need to seek some support to figure out ways to better cope?
I'm a peer wellness coach and counseling center intern here at the Center for Student Counseling and Wellness. I am a senior slash a junior graduating in December of 2024, and we've just been like hosting workshops and like helping people who like apply to be peer wellness coaches. So during the time of COVID, I was a junior in high school, and I guess at first I was like a little confused on what was happening, but I honestly like didn't mind the isolation too much. Like obviously I missed like seeing my friends, and I like liked having a routine of like going to school and stuff. But I think I just like had hope that things would come out for the better, and like as the months progressed, it seemed like that was gonna happen, and I was like, yeah, maybe I don't know like what is college gonna look like, but I ended up graduating high school the following year, and then coming to Gordon the year after that, and so it like really has worked. All right, so for my research methods class last spring, my group did COVID and the impacts of faith on COVID. And so some of the data that we concluded from that was that the isolation impact of norms can be summarized into three main outcomes. The first one is a lack of mental health support aside from one's faith. Second, awareness of oneself in society. And third, their behavior and cognitive spiritual shifts, such as like the reliance on mere faith, political views, self-confidence, and views on depression and anxiety. We were able to conclude that some students who struggled with their mental health through the pandemic found it brought them closer to God, and ultimately now coming out of the pandemic, their faith became at its peak. And so I think that's just like really important, because a lot of people talk about how COVID like kind of impacted their faith, but like not in such a positive way. A lot of people were like, oh, like it kind of helped deteriorate it because like why would God let this happen? But these results show from the Gordon community that actually God can help us and like strengthen their faith, which I think is a really beautiful. I think mental health is like just as important as physical health, and mental health really affects our relationships with others and like how we interact in like our everyday lives, and then it also impacts how we perceive ourselves and like our relationship with God. And so really like taking care of our mental health and seeing its importance as good as like eating a healthy diet and like exercising every day, and taking care of your physical health is super important. And I feel like if you're struggling with that, you always can go to the counseling and wellness center, or you can talk to your professors, because I know they are always super willing to help and listen and understand you, especially here at Gordon. I find that to be especially true.
Anxiety is actually part of the human condition, and I think there's a couple of things that's kind of going on with that. Even when you look to, say, the Genesis story of Adam and Eve, they are trying to all of a sudden take control of their environment, and it doesn't work out. And they're kicked out of the garden. And essentially, with sin entering into the world, mankind is constantly in this struggle to be in control of one's environment, of everything from relationships, the land, people, even trying to control God. And so there's this constant struggle, and that manifests in just our natural anxiety. Another piece is that we are made by God to be people in development, which means we're constantly changing and growing. And if you think about constant change, that's another type of transition. And so we're always in states of transition, And we know that transition is the number one stressor of all. So we're kind of always constantly in some perpetual state of anxiety.
I think just like this project will help inspire others to like seek mental health support, especially when it's been so stigmatized. I think having a resource for people to be open and share their experiences and what they're struggling with is super important. And especially when you have an on center or on campus center for student counseling and wellness, it makes it pretty accessible for you to do that, especially because it's like so located to the center of campus, and it provides like a variety of great services between workshops, like professional counselors, interns, such as myself. Like we all just like kind of work together and like provide the best community of support for those who need it.
But I really hope for anyone watching any initiative or project that has to do with mental health is just to reaffirm that everybody has mental health. And paying attention to your mental health means you're paying attention to the rest of your functioning in life. Sometimes mental health gets put down by people thinking it's not really there, it doesn't exist, and that's just simply not true. It's a part of you. It's a part of your life, and so anything that really can highlight uh, positive ways to be taking care of ourselves, we want to get behind and support. You can schedule an appointment at the Counseling Center by going through our website, which is www.gordon.edu/counseling wellness. You can also access supports on the Oasis app, which we have QR codes for, and you can also find it in, well, wherever you download your apps from.